The Orleans County Grammar School was built in 1823 at the base of Prospect Hill in Brownington Village. It was the first secondary school in the county and was situated on the stagecoach route in the very middle of the county. The Old Stone House is a 4-story, 30-room granite block building built in 1836 by Alexander Twilight to serve as the dormitory for the students. Twilight was the first African American to graduate from an American college and to be elected to public office. This brilliant and determined man guided the school as its headmaster from 1829 until his death in 1857. Shortly after Twilight's death, the dormitory closed. Student population had declined as the developing towns of the county all wanted their own secondary schools. The school itself closed in 1865, with the building in need of much repair. So, in 1869, the townspeople decided to move the building 1/3 of a mile to a more central location down in the middle of the village and to fix it up. The Good Templars, a temperance society, took over the upstairs, initiated the repairs, and set up a kitchen and community dining hall downstairs. Within a few years, the Grange took over the upstairs, and the building has been known as the Brownington Grange Hall for 100 years now. The Old Stone House was purchased by the Orleans County Historical Society in 1917 and opened as a historical museum in 1925. Its 30 rooms have been filled with historical artifacts that have been donated and loaned by the people of Orleans County. For almost 100 years, people have been visiting the Old Stone House, hearing the story of Alexander Twilight and the school. But in the summer of 2015, the town's insurance company decided it was too much of a risk to insure the Grange Hall and recommended boarding it up. With a huge parlor stove for heat, an outhouse, no running water, it wasn't easy to use. But it was a town institution. Neither the Grange, the Brownington Ladies' Aid, nor the town had the money to fix the building up. The Orleans County Historical Society wanted to save the building and move it back to its original site. It is the earliest of all of the buildings in the historic district, and the reason that the Old Stone House was built. At town meeting in March of 2015, the town voted to give the building to the Orleans County Historical Society if it could be moved back to its original site. The society wanted to put it on to a full foundation so that we could introduce running water and central heat. Most importantly, we wanted to save the building. The first step was to find exactly where the original site was. We initiated an archaeological dig and found the outline of the original foundation. We got the wild idea to pull the school back up the road the way it had been moved down in 1869, with oxen. We enlisted Messier house movers to jack the building up and move it back up the road. But right away, we asked if we could get some oxen involved. "You get the oxen, and I will use them," Norm Messier said. So we set out to find the oxen. We went to the county fairs and soon learned that the pulling oxen were not the ones we wanted. They are shod for the pulling rings, and those shoes would slip on the pavement. They are trained to lean hard into the load at the sound of the hitch, and we wanted calmer oxen. The kids and adults in the 4-H barn were interested, but it wasn't until months later that we made contact with the 4-H leaders that made it happen. They came to Brownington to see the museum grounds, the grammar school building, and the route. We have a big field for hosting animals, and a big house for hosting their owners. We assured them that the oxen would not have to pull the entire weight of the building, which the Messiers estimated to weigh 80 tons, uphill on pavement where they could not dig in to get traction. There would be other power, and the oxen would pull as much as they could. Steve Allen was confident it would go well and agreed to coordinate the oxen. He came up with a key piece of hardware that allowed all of the oxen to be hitched together, the jingle bob. It is an equilateral triangle made of iron in the blacksmith shop. Luckily, there is a blacksmith shop at the museum, and our head instructor, also the president of the board of directors, Courtney Meade, was able to make them. Each team, except the ones in front, needed a jingle bob to hook onto the ring in the yoke, dangling down to attach the chains of the teams in front and behind. The oxen gathered on Sunday, August 7th. We had set up a long tie rail with partitions for each team, covered by 5 30-foot long tents. We borrowed water tanks from local sugar makers for watering and washing the oxen, and the Orleans Fire Department filled them. Local farmers donated hay for feed, and a local horse dealer loaned us enough steel fence sections to set up a 150 by 70-foot corral. Hundreds of people came to watch these gentle giants be put through their paces, demonstrating the many hours the young teamsters put into training their animals. Then, in the afternoon, Steve Allen and Robert Judd coordinated the hitching of the teams together for the first time with the jingle bobs. Those tough, determined kids with their well-trained oxen, interspersed with more experienced adult teamsters and their oxen, were soon doing figure eights inside the corral. People cheered. What a sight, and what a confidence builder. On Monday, a perfect morning at 8 a.m., Fairpoint, Comcast, and Orleans Electric started dropping the power and communication lines, which crossed the route 6 times. In 1869, for the first move down to the village, there was no pavement, there were no power lines, and the way was downhill, which created its own problems. In anticipation of a real historic event, one that they would probably never see again, a crowd estimated at 2,500 came out to watch, lining the entire 1/3 mile route. All back roads lead to Brownington, is a local saying, so there were several ways in. Parking lots were set up on the perimeter of the route. It was like old home day. An area on the church lawn had been reserved for older folks and the press. The cows in the bordering field had been confined for the morning in another part of the pasture. Everyone in the crowd, it seemed, had cameras, and 2 drones flew above shooting video. When the lines were all down and the building had been pulled into the middle of the road, the teamsters walked their oxen down the road. The crew t-shirt was green in honor of 4-H colors. The teams of oxen were hitched to the front of the building in 2 long columns on either side of the road. The biggest, strongest oxen were hitched next to the building. Experienced adult teamsters and young teamsters were interspersed. Since a teamster holds the whip in the right hand, they must stand on the left of the oxen. So the teamsters of one column of oxen were between the 2 columns of the massive animals. To the inexperienced, this could seem scary, but the teamsters were not worried. They had confidence in their animals and their own abilities to handle them. The building was mounted on 3 carriages with self-powered dollies underneath. Slowly, slowly it started to move. to thunderous applause from the appreciative onlookers. The oxen pulled some, but many more would have been needed to actually pull the heavy building up the hill, with little traction on the pavement. But after a few fits and starts, the whole team seemed to get into a rhythm. All of that hard work that these kids had been doing with their animals was finally paying off in a grandiose fashion. Mrs. Carla Messier sat proudly in front of the building on the carriages, gliding the structure up the straight and narrow path. At 30 feet wide and 8 feet above the road, the building spanned the entire width of the roadway. All went very smoothly, according to plan, onward and upward to the final turn into the field at Prospect Hill, where its new foundation awaited. As the building reached journey's end, the teams of oxen were unhitched to another spontaneous round of applause. It had been a fine event that had given everyone involved, onlookers and teamsters alike, a good sense of how these major tasks were accomplished back in the day. Indeed, it was a true living history event that will go down into the annals of Orleans County history and will not soon be forgotten. Kudos to the staff of the Old Stone House, Messier house movers, all of the teamsters, all of the volunteers and community members that made this such a successful and memorable event.